Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him.
Okay, let's unpack this. When I say the word Armageddon, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Be honest.
Oh, it's a giant asteroid.
It's always the asteroid.
Or Bruce Willis in a spacesuit. It's become this, pop culture shorthand for just the end of the world, any big disaster.
Exactly. But today, we are stripping all that away. We're doing a deep dive into a very specific, and I mean a really intense theological argument. We're looking at sources, lectures, breakdowns from groups like the Israel of God that argue Armageddon isn't a metaphor.
And it's definitely not an asteroid.
No.
No. In these texts, Armageddon is a place. It's a dot on a map, a literal military staging ground. And what we're going to explore is this timeline that they claim predicts exactly how the world ends.
And it's not a random cosmic event, it's a geopolitical checklist.
A very precise one.
And I should warn you up front, this is a counter-narrative. If you're used to hearing about a rapture or a 7-year peace treaty, well, these sources are going to flip that upside down.
Completely. We're talking about a timeline that they say involves the European Union, a massive Russian alliance, and a day of the Lord that looks less like a Sunday service.
And more like an extraterrestrial invasion.
It's a lot. So we're going to decode the timeline, why they say the whole 7-year tribulation is a math error, and then identify the players. The beast, the kings of the east.
And finally, what they call the invasion of Christ.
You're right.
So let's start with that controversy. The timeline.
Yeah.
I think most people have heard the standard story. The Antichrist shows up, signs a peace treaty with Israel for 7 years, and that starts the clock.
That's the popular theory, yeah.
But these sources say that's completely wrong.
They argue it's not just wrong, it's based on a fundamental misreading of grammar and history. It all goes back to the book of Daniel.
Daniel 9.
Specifically Daniel 9, verse 27. The verse that mentions confirming the covenant with many for 1 week.
Okay, pause there. 1 week. How does 1 week turn into 7 years of global chaos?
Well, that's the one part almost everyone agrees on. It's a prophetic principle. A day for a year. You see it in Numbers, in Ezekiel. So 7 days in a prophetic week equals 7 literal years.
Okay, so the 7 years is solid. Where's the disagreement?
It's about who owns that week. The mainstream theory says the he in that verse is the Antichrist making a treaty.
Right.
But the sources we're looking at say, hang on, look at the verb. The text says confirm the covenant. It doesn't say make a covenant.
Is there really a difference? I mean, come on.
Well, think about it. If you call to confirm a dinner reservation, are you making a new one?
No, I'm just verifying one I already have.
Exactly. You're strengthening something that already exists.
Yeah.
These sources argue the Antichrist can't confirm God's covenant because he doesn't have one. The only person who could possibly confirm the promises made to Abraham
is Jesus.
Is Jesus. So they're saying this 7-year clock was never about the Antichrist. It was about the Messiah.
So when did it start ticking?
The argument is that Jesus' ministry, from his baptism to his crucifixion, lasted exactly 3.5 years. That was the first half of the week. He was confirming the covenant. Then Daniel says he was cut off.
He was killed.
Crucified. And the text says the sacrifice and oblation would cease. And what happened the moment Jesus died?
The veil in the temple ripped.
Right. From top to bottom, the end of the animal sacrifice system. So if the first 3.5 years happened 2,000 years ago,
there's only 3.5 years left on the clock.
That's it. That's why you see the number 42 months or 1,260 days all over the book of Revelation. That's the Great Tribulation. Not 7 years, just 3.5.
That dramatically shortens the timeline.
Yeah.
But, okay, if the main bad guy isn't in that verse, we still have to figure out who he is. What about the guy on the white horse in Revelation 6? White horse? That's a good guy, right? I always assumed that was Jesus.
This is a very common assumption. White horse must be the hero. But our sources say, look closer at his equipment.
His equipment?
The writer in Revelation 6 has a bow, a weapon of war. And he goes out conquering and to conquer.
Okay, he's aggressive. So what?
But now compare him to the description of Jesus when he returns in Revelation 19. When he comes back on a white horse, he has a sword coming out of his mouth. His eyes are like fire.
It's a very different vibe.
A completely different vibe. The sources identify that first writer, the guy with the bow, as the great imposter. It's the Antichrist system mimicking the Messiah to fool the world.
A counterfeit. Okay, so that sets the stage for the beast. This is where it gets really geopolitical and honestly a little strange. When I hear the beast, I'm thinking of a monster. These texts think it's the European Union.
I know, it sounds like a massive leap, but you have to follow their historical tracking. They trace the empires: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, then Rome.
Daniel's dream.
Yeah.
The statue with the gold head, silver chest.
Correct. The legs of that statue were Iron Rome, but the feet, the final kingdom, they were a mix of iron and clay, and they had 10 toes.
10 toes.
The argument is that the Roman Empire never really died. It just broke apart and is now reforming. They identify the beast with 10 horns as a revived Roman Empire, which they map directly onto the EU.
So the 10 toes are 10 nations.
10 nations or 10 powers within that European bloc. But it's not just political. The text talks about a little horn that rises up among them, a religious power that influences the political body.
And who do they say that is?
They identify it specifically as the papacy, or a religious leader rising from that European structure to dominate the world stage.
Okay, so that's one side of the chessboard. A European superpower, backed by a religious authority. Who are they fighting? You can't have a world war with just one player.
This is where we look east. The sources identify the opposing force as the kings of the east,
Which would be?
Russia and her allies. The texts explicitly link the biblical names Gog and Magog to the landmass of modern Russia. And they don't come alone. We're talking a likely alliance with China, maybe India.
That is half the world's population.
It's massive. And there's a key geographical marker mentioned in Revelation, the Euphrates River. The prophecy says the river dries up to prepare the way for these eastern kings.
And the Euphrates is drying up. I've seen that in the news.
Exactly. But these sources view it strategically. The Euphrates has always been the divider between East and West. If you remove that barrier physically or symbolically, you open a highway for this massive army to pour into the Middle East.
So the board is set. Europe and the religious system in the West, Russia and the Eastern Alliance. What's the spark? What's the one signal that tells everyone the real war is starting?
The abomination of desolation.
It's such a great name for a metal band.
It really is. But what it is, it's the specific signal Jesus gave in Matthew 24. He says, when you see the abomination of desolation, stand in the holy place.
And the holy place is a literal temple in Jerusalem.
The literal temple, that's the interpretation.
But wait, there is no Jewish temple in Jerusalem right now.
Exactly. And that's why these sources say you have to watch the news. They argue a third temple will be built. And the moment that religious leader from the European coalition enters that temple and sits down, claiming to be God.
That's it. That's the trigger.
That is the abomination. And that's the moment the 3.5-year clock starts. The sources are so emphatic about the urgency. The Bible says if you're in Judea, flee to the mountains. Don't go back for your coat. Run.
Because what follows is the Great Tribulation.
Right.
And the imagery for this war it's wild. Locusts with stinging tails and lions' teeth. Sounds like something out of a nightmare. But the analysis here is different.
It's a very different take. It assumes the prophet John, writing in the 1st century, saw a vision of the future, but just had no words for it.
Right.
Put yourself in his sandals, you've seen a spear, maybe a chariot. Suddenly you see an Apache helicopter gunship. How do you even begin to describe it?
I guess. It flies, so maybe it's like a locust.
It flies, it makes a deafening noise, the sound of many chariots rushing to battle, and it has a tail that stings.
The tail rotor. Or missiles.
They suggest the stings are rear weaponry, missiles, something like that. The faces of men. Imagine looking at the cockpit. You see the pilots. To John, that could look like a locust with a human face.
And the hair of women. What's that?
Could be anything. The blur of the rotor blades, maybe camouflage netting. The point is, he's trying to describe 21st century military hardware with 1st century words.
So the fire and brimstone coming from their mouths.
That's cannon fire, muzzle flashes, chemical warfare.
It makes a weird kind of sense. And the scale of this war is terrifying.
The numbers are astronomical. There's a prophecy about an army of 200 million.
200 million.
Yeah, and the text says a third part of men were killed by this. You apply that to today's population, we're talking about billions of people. This isn't a regional conflict. It's an extinction-level event.
Which brings us to the climax, the day of the Lord. Now, I always thought the day of the Lord was, a good thing. But these texts paint a picture that is honestly horrific.
It is the opposite of a celebration. It's a day of thick darkness and gloom. The sun turns black, the moon turns to blood.
Is that literal, or is that the sky blotted out by all the nukes?
It fits the description of a nuclear winter, yeah. But the key is how people react. They aren't looking up in joy. The text says the rich men, the captains, the mighty, the billionaires, and the generals, they run for their bunkers. They hide in caves and ask the mountains to fall on them.
They'd rather be crushed to death.
To hide from the wrath of the Lamb.
See, that phrase always gets me. Wrath of the Lamb. Lambs are fuzzy. They don't do wrath.
And that's the shock. The Jesus of the day of the Lord isn't the gentle servant. He returns as a man of war. The sources describe it as a literal invasion from heaven. He brings 10,000s of his saints, which they say is the angelic army, to forcefully take over the planet.
It sounds like an alien invasion, but the aliens are on our side. Or God's side.
In a way. And this is where it all converges. So the European beast and the Eastern kings, they're fighting each other.
Right.
But then they see this invasion force coming from the sky. And suddenly they have a much bigger problem.
So they team up.
They turn their weapons toward the sky. Armageddon is just the staging area, the gathering place. The actual judgment happens in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, right outside Jerusalem.
The Valley of Decision.
Correct. And the imagery here is gruesome. The Bible uses the metaphor of a winepress of the wrath of God.
The armies are the grapes.
The armies are the grapes, and there's that detail about the blood. It says it flows up to the horses' bridles.
That's, what, 5-6 feet high?
About that, yeah.
For a distance of 1,600 furlongs. I looked that up. That's almost 200 miles.
Just try to picture that. A river of blood, 5 feet deep,
Yeah.
stretching for 200 miles.
That's not a battle. That's a blender. That sounds physically impossible.
If you think of it as a human fight, yes. But remember who they're fighting. The expert in these lectures brings up a historical precedent. King Sennacherib of Assyria.
From the Old Testament, he besieged Jerusalem.
Right, and according to the text, the angel of the Lord went out one night and killed 185,000 of his soldiers while they slept.
One angel took out a whole army.
One angel. Now multiply that by 10,000s of his saints. The source is arguing this isn't a fight. It's a wipeout. It is the end of all human military power.
Okay, that is heavy. But does anyone survive this? It sounds like the end of the human race.
It's not the end of humanity, but it is a bottleneck. The sources are clear. There are survivors. First, you have the 144,000.
That famous number, who are they?
In this interpretation, they are specifically Israelites, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes who are sealed or protected by God before the worst of it begins.
The remnant of Israel. Okay,
Yeah.
What about everybody else?
The text describes a great multitude, which no one could number, from all nations. These are people who, according to the sources, washed their robes during the tribulation.
Meaning they repented. They chose a side.
Exactly. They saw the chaos, they saw the abomination, and they decided to align themselves with God. They survive.
But the leaders don't.
No. The beast, the political leader, and the false prophet are captured, and they are thrown alive into a lake of fire.
Alive.
They don't die and go to hell. They are physically disposed of, and the location is implied to be right there in Jerusalem. It becomes a visible monument to judgment.
And then the cleanup.
The supper of the great God. The birds are called to eat the flesh of the kings and captains. It's nature reclaiming the battlefield.
It's a grim image, but I guess it leads to the final goal. This isn't just destruction for destruction's sake. It's a regime change.
That is the core point. The kingdoms of this world become the kingdom of Christ. And there's a total change in policy, the most famous prophecy of all. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
War is abolished.
Not just paused, abolished. The entire military-industrial complex is just gone.
So if we zoom out, the roadmap these sources lay out is, you have to be paying attention to very specific things.
Right. Step 1, watch Europe. The consolidation of power, the rise of a religious influence. That's the beast.
Step 2, watch the East. The tension between the West and a Russian-led alliance.
Step 3, the temple. If you see a third temple going up in Jerusalem, the clock is ticking loud.
And step 4, the abomination. The religious leader sits in that temple. That's the final signal to run.
And then the final 3.5 years of chaos.
The sources really hammer this idea of watching. It's not enough to just believe. You have to be an informed observer.
That's the why it matters here. The sources quote Jesus saying, "Watch and pray." The argument is, if you don't understand the geopolitics, you won't recognize the signs. You won't know when to flee. You'll get caught in the crossfire. Watching is about physical survival.
It makes you look at the news in a whole different light.
It connects a 2,000-year-old scroll to your social media feed.
Before we wrap up, there was one thought in the research that really stuck with me. A provocative question for our listeners. The sources mention that verse. Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved.
Right. If God didn't intervene, everyone would die.
But think about that. For thousands of years, humans could kill each other, but we couldn't wipe out the whole species. We just didn't have the technology.
We could damage the planet, but not destroy it.
Exactly. So, does the fact that the prophecy talks about shortening the days to save flesh imply that we've only now, in this generation, reached the technological point where we're actually capable of total self-annihilation?
It implies the end of the world isn't God smashing the planet in anger. It's God stepping in to stop us from committing mass suicide.
And on that cheery note, that's something to mull over. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Keep your eyes open.
And keep watching.